What's up, and welcome to the video. On the table in front of me, we have the recently announced and recently released iPad Air. I believe this is Generation 5. And there is a lot of things to like about this iPad, mainly the fact that its performance has been supercharged by the Apple M1 chip. But there are a couple of things that I want to talk to you about before you potentially go out and spend your hard-earned money on this iPad. So let's jump right in. This is the 2022 iPad Air. There is a lot of recycling going on from iPad Air 4th generation and now this one, which is the 5th generation iPad Air. From a design perspective, they're basically identical, which I actually don't mind. I was a big fan of how the 4th gen iPad Air looked, so I'm happy to see that it's really similar this time around as well. If you just take a look around the iPad, it's going to look exactly the same. Quite honestly, if you were to look at a 4th gen and a 5th gen, I'm not really sure how you'd be able to tell them apart. So you still have that overall design language. It looks really good. I love it. The display is absolutely identical. It's a really nice LCD display. You still have the same rear camera on the back. Please don't be the type of person who takes pictures with an iPad. You still have the stereo speakers on the left and right side of the iPad, or up and down, depending on which orientation you're holding it on. Now, where you will see upgrades on 5th gen is going to be in 5G, which is pretty self-explanatory. If you get a cellular model iPad, you'll have access to faster network speeds. And you also get a bump in the selfie camera department. So you're going to go from 7 megapixels on iPad Air 4 to a 12 megapixel ultra-wide angle with center stage. Now, if you haven't used center stage on an iPad for a FaceTime call, it's actually pretty dope. So that ultra-wide angle lens is going to allow you to get more people in on a FaceTime call without needing you guys to cram together and get really uncomfortable. And center stage basically makes the camera smart enough to follow you around a little bit if you decide to move around while on the FaceTime call, so you don't have to continuously adjust the angle of the iPad. You can just leave it there and the camera follows you around. So I think that's definitely a welcome upgrade. But by far, the biggest upgrade from 5th gen from 4th is going to be the Apple M1 chip inside. So M1 is here, and we all know that it's a very capable, very powerful chip. And of course, it's definitely not new, right? We've seen it starting with the MacBook Airs that eventually transitioned to the MacBook Pros, and it's also on the current iPad Pro that's sitting on the desk right in front of me, the iPad Pro with M1. And now we see it here in the iPad Air, which essentially will bump the Air up into that performance category that was reserved for the previous devices running M1. You're going to be capable of doing so many awesome things on this iPad. Just to give you a few examples, and these are all things that I've done on my current iPad Pro. You can edit videos, 4K 60 frame per second videos using iMovie, add effects, add voiceovers, add different types of cuts and animations pretty seamlessly using iMovie, and also export it on the iPad if video creation is your thing. The iPad Air is also compatible with all of the native Apple accessories that are going to increase its productivity capabilities, like the Magic Keyboard and the 2nd generation Apple Pencil. So maybe digital illustration or graphics are more your thing. You can use the pencil to create awesome stuff in Procreate, or you can just use the Magic Keyboard to type up some documents and just be more productive while on the go. Either way, with M1, the performance capabilities are here. Not to mention, you also have an upgraded Thunderbolt port on this iPad now. I believe it is Gen 3 Thunderbolt. So you'll still be able to do things like plug in external hard drives. You'll be able to run this iPad to a display and power that display. I mean, from a performance capability perspective, this iPad is very powerful. I'm still hoping to see Apple improve iPad OS because I feel like M1 on a MacBook makes sense, but M1 on an iPad is still kind of overkill because iPadOS, to me at least, still kind of leans more towards a mobile operating system instead of a desktop operating system. So to make a bit of a long story short, performance, absolute overkill. It's fantastic. We're still waiting to see if Apple can increase those capabilities with full-fledged software. So we've established that there are a lot of great things whenever it comes to the 5th generation iPad Air. But if you were with me at the beginning of the video, remember I told you there were a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about before you spend your hard-earned money on this iPad? Well, we're at that point of the review. So the first thing, actually both are a little awkward, but the first thing is related to how this iPad's built and the second is related to how this iPad is priced. So I don't know if this is just my iPad in particular. If you have already bought a 5th gen iPad Air and you're watching this video, please feel free to chime in with your experiences in the comments. But I realized as I was using it that if I press into the back panel of the iPad, I can literally feel the back panel recess into the iPad to the point where it almost feels like you can feel the internals. And I'm gonna try to show you on camera. I'm not sure how much of it will actually get across, but I'm not applying a lot of pressure here. And we had other folks here in the studio try it as well, and they can definitely feel it too. So I don't know what exactly changed between 4th and 5th gen, because like I said, they're built very similarly, but this doesn't feel very structurally sound. And another scary part is that with just a little bit of pressure, I'm not trying to bend this by any stretch of the imagination, but with just a little bit of pressure, you can actually see some distortion pop up in the display. But I don't recall the previous gen iPad Air doing this, and I'm not sure how many people are affected by this. I don't know if it's just isolated to me, but hopefully Apple's gonna do something about this, because yeah, it's just awkward. So with that out of the way, let's talk about pricing, because that's also a little bit of an interesting topic too. So for just 64 gigs of storage, Wi-Fi only, this iPad Air starts at $600. Now, as great as it would be for me to sit over here and tell you that you're probably going to be okay to buy an iPad with 64 gigs of storage, you probably won't be. So just from a software perspective alone, this iPad has 14 gigs taken up just with software and the basic apps that come installed with it out of the box, which leaves you with about 50 gigs free. For some people, very, very basic users, that might be okay. But for other users, let's say maybe you're going to utilize the M1 to do some gaming. I mean, there are some mobile games that are upwards of 5 to 10 gigs nowadays. So it's pretty wild. I feel like you could fill up 64 gigs of storage very quickly. And that was actually a talking point whenever we reviewed the most recent iPad mini as well. So if you wanted to bump to Wi-Fi only and 256 gigs of storage, it's $750, so $150 more expensive. Here's the thing, at $750, you could just pay $50 more to get the same 11-inch iPad Pro. Now there is a caveat, the $50 will get you the Pro, but it will cut your storage in half. But I think it's a lot more feasible to get away with 128 gigs of storage base as opposed to 64 gigs of base storage. Plus, the iPad Pro comes with its own set of benefits as well, right? You're going to get the ProMotion display, 120 hertz, so it's going to be super buttery, super fluid. You're going to get 2 rear cameras on the back, which I guess doesn't make that much of a difference, but if augmented reality is your thing, you're also going to get LiDAR. You will get built-in studio microphones if you ever wanted to record any voiceovers using your iPad. And of course, you're going to get Thunderbolt 4, which has some more capabilities from a USB-C perspective as well. So you definitely have that feature set on the iPad Pro for just $50 more if you could handle half of the base storage, which I feel like for most people out there, 128 is going to suit you a lot better than 64 starting out. So this iPad Air is very capable, but I just don't know how many folks it'll appeal to given its price point, especially once you start upgrading storage or once you start upgrading connectivity options. It's just very awkwardly priced. So that's about it though, whenever it comes to the 5th generation iPad Air. Again, if you have an iPad Air, chime in the comments, let me know what you think. If you enjoyed the review, consider subscribing down below. We have content coming on the new iPhone SE. Should be very exciting. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. What's up, and welcome to the video. On the table in front of me, we have the recently announced and also recently released iPad Air. I believe this is the 6th generation, right? iPad Air 6? 6. 5? Okay, well, we're going to redo this.